course, not only from the video we have here, but then the crowds let us know with their cheers and applause.
It will be we'll all be trying to give you immediately the name of the cardinal, which has now become the Pope. And as I believe, TJ, you mentioned earlier, or no, Father Bob, you mentioned, it will be in Latin. And so we'll all be brushing up on our Latin in between, now and then, so that we will have the name correctly. And then we'll also get to hear the name that the new Pope chooses to be
I
his
think
new...
the name is always also interesting because it kind of gives this vision of what he wants to do with the purpose. Probably not what he wants to do, but what inspires him. And Father had an anecdote there. I also have one. And when Pope Francis chose the name Francis, one of the Jesuits in Zambia told me, we were so excited because we thought you were chosen Francis Xavier.
Yes. And actually it was the next morning that Francis clarified that this was Francis of Assisi. So
yeah, it's true, because a lot of people were trying to guess and figure it out.
That's right. When he met with journalists, he explained the origin of the name that he took and why.
And it's special, like you mentioned about the Pope, right? So it usually drives an idea of what the focus might be for the pontificate, choosing this special name. And we had mentioned earlier, right, that the person, I think it was Liz that mentioned, the person becomes a new person in that sense. Like the Pope is a new man because he gets rid of the old name, takes on this new name, and he's no longer just cardinal whoever. He's the Pope of the Universal Church, the Pope that is the symbol of the Catholic Church around the world. Not only because, he's known as Pope, but also because of his white cassock that is widely recognizable.
We're seeing these camera shots. Those big television screens, people know when they're on camera, and so they have their moment of fame, a few seconds of fame, waving and greeting everyone there. So it's always kind of fun too. It brings a little involvement and participation for everyone.
And it's good that the authorities, I think they planned this very well. You have screens around the Vatican, so that reduces also the congestion. We have the new square which has just been redone for the Jubilee year here. So there's another screen there just outside this building. And people are just sitting out there. They are not rushing to go to the square. So they can see. And maybe they even get a better shot a better view from the screen there. So there are a number of these large screens surrounding the area. And I think it will very good.
Yeah, wonderful. And then even just the organization, I'm always impressed with the organization, crowd organization, how people are led into these areas to assure that they can get in. It might take a little time, but then also how everything has come off so well without a hitch.
I guess it was almost prophetic because so much of the reconfiguration of the square and Via della Conciliazione was done for the Jubilee, but it served very well for the funeral and
the city has done all these works projects also to help traffic flow well through the area. And here we have let's see
yes, and was the head of
the helicopters. He's in the square now. So it's getting louder and more apparent that there's people from all over and everyone's getting images of the square.
People are running across the road.
Right. Gotta keep them safe too.
You gotta keep them safe.
So one of our colleagues, she did a lot of research on why we have this tradition of changing the baptismal name of the cardinal into the name for the Pope, and it actually started way back, 2,000 years ago to St. Peter, whose original name was Simon, and so it stems all the way from that, and it's a lineage that's been continuous since that time, and actually. What's interesting is that not all the popes have done this. Out of the 266 now, 267, only 129 have actually chosen a new name, which I never realized.
It was much later before the new name was put into place.
There you go. And it was John the 12th. John the 12th. And only during that time, from 955 to today, it's only 2 other people that have not taken new names, which is interesting.
Very interesting.
So we've gone from the smoke watch in the morning now to the Pope watch.
So we're on a
new
Pope watch
here from the central balcony, and I think we're coming up on prime time here. I think soon we should be seeing the new Pope appear. And we're getting some zooming, some close-ups here of the crowds there, and we saw some Vatican officials before.
That's also
As well as the mayor of Rome, is that correct?
Yes.
That's right.
I was going to say that it's been interesting also from the time the Holy Father Pope Francis died, how the liturgies have been moving and preparing the people.
Yes.
Even yesterday's Mass, just, the prayers, we implore you, give us a shepherd, pleasing to you, one who will lead us by example and lead us to the gospel truth. This is in the collect and in the closing prayers. So this conclave liturgy is also very elaborate and very moving and preparing the people. So it's not just like this is just a successor to Francis. This is actually a transformation. This is going to be Peter now, who is going to be taking office.
That's right. Cardinal Ray said that in his homily, didn't he?
He's been such a gift during this time too, Cardinal Ray.
That was incredible.
92 years old, full of energy and beautiful homilies, really inspiring us and helping us live through this whole ordeal.
Very inspiring, like 92.
Yes, 92 years old.
Amazing.
Yeah, inspiration indeed. And then his energy, and also animated as well, in delivering, giving his homilies as well with passion. So I'm always impressed. But so here we are. All right, we got this flag.
Someone is just asking me on the phone, do we have the name yet? No.
Yes.
We will learn with all of you.
We're all like everyone else.
It must be hard for those cardinals out there now,
right.
because I'm sure they're not allowed to tell us. But
Exactly.
That's true. Yeah.
Wow.
Mom's the word.
Mom is the word. Now we're just waiting for the appearance. Pope Watch is on high alert.
That's right. It could be turned into. It will be a warning. So
It will be.
Okay. So. So even some quiet among the crowds now as this anticipation is sinking in and building.
Because I think what they will do as soon as the square is full, they don't let any more people inside to prevent a stampede.
That makes sense.
It
Yeah.
makes a lot of
Again,
sense.
like you were saying, the safety.
Yeah.
Safety is a big priority.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you see even small children getting excited for this moment on our screen. So from
It's
the
kind of fun.
youngest to the oldest.
Fun for them, fun for us. too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's as fun for all
For us
ages.
adults. Indeed.
And even the
Vatican time. And we're lucky the sun's gone down behind, it looks like behind the Basilica now, so you won't have the sun blinding you as you look at the central balcony of the lodge there.
So a bit of anxiety yesterday, when the smoke wasn't coming, and say, what's happening? Why is it taking that long and so forth? But you could understand that it has been explained. There's so much to do. The jurament,
The homily of Cardinal Cantalamessa as well.
and then there was also the Vespers as well. So I think we could understand. But you could also understand also the anxiety and the joy and the excitement surrounding all that.
Sure. And then the first time going through the whole process of the voting process, whereas by the time this morning came along, it wasn't anything new. They were going in there to vote, and, before prayer, of course.
I mean, a lot of these flags that we're seeing on the screen as we wait for the Pope It reminds me a lot of World Youth Day, the same kind of excitement, the same kind of building. You know, you see young people from all over. It's a really beautiful image, and I think is again just a sign of the youthfulness of the church. You know, we talk a lot about the future of the church, which begins with this new pope, but the young people that are also present at this moment to see the historic aspect of this. It's really beautiful.
And we see the internationality, the universality of the Catholic Church. It's a global reality, and we see that in the crowds there in the square.
And this we also saw during the funeral of Francis. So many people.
Okay, there's movement. Okay.
Yes, there is movement.
Here we go.
The white curtains are behind the glass door. Now the doors are being opened.
Let me see first.
Here we are.
Cardinal Lamberti.
The Cardinal Protodeacon.
Dominique Lamberti.
He's smiling.
He's smiling. He will give us the announcement. Here we are.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus Papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV. La pace sia con tutti voi. Fratelli, sorelle carissimi, questo è il primo saluto del Cristo risorto, il buon pastore che ha dato la vita per il gregge di Dio. Anch'io vorrei che questo saluto di pace entrasse nel vostro cuore, raggiungesse le vostre famiglie, a tutte le persone, ovunque siano, a tutti i popoli, a tutta la terra. La pace sia con voi. Questa è la pace di Cristo risorto, una pace disarmata e una pace disarmante, umile e perseverante. Proviene da Dio, Dio che ci ama a tutti incondizionalmente. Ancora conserviamo nei nostri orecchi quella voce debole ma sempre coraggiosa di Papa Francesco che benediva Roma. Il Papa che benediva Roma dava la sua benedizione al mondo intero quella mattina del giorno di Pasqua. Consentitemi di dar seguito a quella stessa benedizione. Dio ci vuole bene, Dio vi ama tutti e il male non prevarrà. Siamo tutti nelle mani di Dio. Pertanto, senza paura, uniti, mano nella mano con Dio e tra di noi, andiamo avanti. Siamo discepoli di Cristo. Cristo ci precede. Il mondo ha bisogno della sua luce. L'umanità necessita di Lui come il ponte per essere raggiunta da Dio e dal suo amore. Aiutateci anche voi, poi gli uni gli altri, a costruire i ponti con il dialogo, con l'incontro, unendoci tutti per essere un solo popolo, sempre in pace. Grazie a Papa Francesco. Voglio ringraziare anche tutti i confratelli cardinali che hanno scelto me per essere successore di Pietro e camminare insieme a voi come Chiesa unita, cercando sempre la pace, la giustizia, cercando sempre lavorare come uomini e donne fedeli a Gesù Cristo, senza paura, per proclamare il Vangelo, per essere missionari. Sono un figlio di Sant'Agostino, agostiniano, che ha detto: con voi sono cristiano e per voi vescovo. In questo senso possiamo tutti camminare insieme verso quella patria la quale Dio ci ha preparato. Alla Chiesa di Roma un saluto speciale. Dobbiamo cercare insieme come essere una Chiesa missionaria, una Chiesa che costruisce i ponti, il dialogo, sempre aperta a ricevere, come questa piazza con le braccia aperte, a tutti coloro che hanno bisogno della nostra carità, la nostra presenza, il dialogo, l'amore. Y se me permiten también una palabra, un saludo a todos aquellos, y en modo particular a mi querida diócesis de Chiclayo en el Perú. Donde un pueblo fiel ha acompañado a su obispo, ha compartido su fe y ha dado tanto para seguir siendo iglesia fiel de Jesucristo. A tutti voi, fratelli e sorelle di Roma, d'Italia, di tutto il mondo, vogliamo essere una Chiesa sinodale, una Chiesa che cammina, una Chiesa che cerca sempre la pace, cerca sempre la carità, cerca sempre di essere vicino specialmente a coloro che soffrono. Oggi, il giorno della supplica alla Madonna di Pompei, nostra Madre Maria vuole sempre camminare con noi, stare vicino, aiutarci con la sua intercessione e il suo amore. Allora vorrei pregare insieme a voi. Preghiamo insieme per questa nuova missione, però per tutta la Chiesa, per la pace nel mondo, e chiediamo questa grazia speciale di Maria, nostra Madre. Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Il Santo Padre Leone, a tutti i fedeli presenti e a quelli che ricevono la sua benedizione a mezzo della radio, della televisione e delle altre tecnologie di comunicazione, concede l'indulgenza plenaria nella forma stabilita dalla Chiesa. Preghiamo Dio Onnipotente perché conservi a lungo il Papa a guida della Chiesa e conceda pace e unità alla Chiesa in tutto il mondo.
Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et auctoritate confidimus, ipsi intercedat pro nobis ad Dominum. Amen. Precibus et meritis Beate Mariae semper Virginis, beati Michaelis Arcangeli, beati Ioannis Baptiste, et sanctorum apostolorum Petri et Pauli et omnium sanctorum. Misereatur vestri omnipotens Deus, et dimissis omnibus peccatis vestris, perducat vos Iesus Christus ad vitam aeternam. Amen. Indulgentiam, absolutionem et remissionem omnium peccatorum vestrorum, spatium vere et fructuose penitentiae, cor semper penitens, et emendationem vitae, gratiam et consolationem Sancti Spiritus, et finalem perseverantiam in bonis operibus tribuat vobis omnipotens et misericors Dominus. Amen. Et benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.